Ron Fournier was one of those Arkansans who went to Washington with Bill Clinton, not to work for him, but to write about him for the Associated Press. Over the past 12 years, Ron has established himself as a premier political reporter, both as a White House correspondent and as the AP's chief political writer. He earned the prestigious Merriman Smith Award from the White House Correspondents Association for his coverage of the September 11th attacks from inside the evacuated White House. His bylines have frequented publications all over the globe. Along with Doug Sosnick, a Clinton political strategist, and Matthew Dowd, a political strategist for George W. Bush, Ron has written a very interesting and thought-provoking book, Applebee's America: How Successful Political, Business, and Religious Leaders Connect with the New American Community. And that's what he will be discussing tonight. After leaving the Associated Press, Ron has started Hot Soup, an issues-based online community that will serve as a public forum in which people will exchange ideas, opinions, and network with each other. It is scheduled to be operational next month. From the Hot Springs Sentinel Record to the Arkansas Democrat, to the Associated Press in Little Rock, to the Associated Press in Washington, to Applebee's America, to Hot Soup, Ron continues his fascinating and challenging career. We're honored to have him with us here at the Clinton School. After his remarks, Patrick Kennedy will moderate a question and answer session, which will then be followed by a book signing and reception. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome home Ron Fournier.
Thanks for having me, and this is home. This is, I get back here as often as I can, and as soon as I step foot in on the tarmac in Little Rock, I feel my blood pressure go down about 20 points. I just had a wonderful time. I spent yesterday with some old friends, Joan Duffy, Dennis Byrd, Harry King, James Jefferson, the former Max Parker. If you don't know those names, those are the names of some of the best journalists in America. You have the privilege of them still working here in Arkansas. I competed against and worked with some great people in Washington, and I left behind those folks and some others who are just top-notch, taught me how to do my profession, and I miss them very much every day. Also had a little tour today on the way out to UAMS. I spoke at a couple classes there this morning, and I went up Markham and took a little jog on B Street, went by the old house, which hasn't changed at all, still has the black trim and the little porch swing that my babies swang on. Went by Doctor's Hospital where both of my babies were born, and then called my oldest baby who's in college, and my other baby who's started high school this week, and realized I am getting old. A lot of people ask me, what does Applebee's America stand for? It's actually Latin for my daughter's in college. Please buy it so I can afford to send her. Talk a little bit more about the title in the Q&A if you want, but it's kind of an interesting journey, how I got the name of a restaurant in the book title. It's not a biography about the restaurant, but it's a book about, in part, the new American community that Applebee's America is kind of stood for us. The way this book got started was after the 2000 campaign, which was one of the, it was a historic campaign, and I was very proud of the performance of my job I did on the campaign. And after the attacks in 2001, which obviously were an incredible period to live through and to be in the White House after the evacuation and covering those horrible events. I realized that I still wasn't covering politics the way we need to cover it, that I had done as good as I could staying in Washington and covering it the way I was taught, that somehow I wasn't coming to grips with the enormity of change going on in the country. And the person that really pushed me in this direction was Doug Sosnick, who worked for President Clinton both as political director and then as a counselor in the second term. Who'd always been kind of a mentor in a way to me, someone who was willing to take a little time over lunch or over beers to advice on how to connect with Americans, understand what Americans were doing as a reporter. And he's the one that said that, the country is really changing, and society is really changing, and the people who presume to lead people need to change with them. And it was kind of his idea. He said, wouldn't it be interesting if you could get out there and find out how political business leaders are connecting with Americans and how they're adapting to change. And maybe there's something we can learn in politics. So coming out of that conversation also was the idea, and this was mine, of spending some time in the fastest changing parts of the country, and that was Serbia. And going to a place, and I picked Applebee's for a number of reasons, in part because it was so big, it's everywhere in the fast growing parts of the country. Also, it happens to have the demographics. If you look at their internal demographics, about as many Republicans as there are Democrats. Blue collar, type of middle class, basically the type of people that campaigns are going after. So I spent a lot of time in Applebee's. Basically, any time that AP sent me an assignment to do a voter story, or people think about Iraq, or what they thought about immigration, I'd stop in Applebee's. Or if I was at a debate in Michigan, I'd stop in Applebee's. If I was at a Kerry event in St. Louis, I'd stop in Applebee's. So I collected all these interviews, basically made it on the wire. Rarely would I mention Applebee's, but that was kind of like my role in the focus group. When the election got over, I told Doug, I think there's something here, but I just don't know what to do with it. There's a lot going on out there. And he said, well, we should do a book. We should have a Republican involved with us. I know you can't do something which is partisan. So I called Matthew Dow, someone who I trust, who was the Bush campaign, and Matthew agreed to do the book. Well, we initially, what we honed in on right away was the idea, and we got to get a handle on this change. What is going on in society? And we realized, we are going through the kind of change that this country hasn't seen in 100 years. You have the movement from the industrial era to the info tech era. All this flood of information people are getting, and these new technologies that are dramatically changing the way we live our life. I was mentioning in there that when Bush became president, there wasn't a blog. Literally was not a blog, and now there's 60 to 90 million. When President Clinton first became president, it was barely an internet, and now look at how it's changed our lives. The war on terrorism, obviously, changing the way people live, the way they think of themselves. Globalization, changing the way people look at the economy, look at their status in life, and the fragility of their economic condition. The loss of faith in institutions. It is incredible how we've had a steep decline in the public's trust and faith in government, business, and even religious leaders. And how that has been going down since the 50s and spiked up at 9/11 and stayed up there for maybe 18 months. Then it started its slope down again. Katrina hit, and it went right through the tank. Katrina kind of really crystallized for people what they already thought about the ineffectiveness, corrupted nature of politics, business, even NGOs, even the Red Cross seemed to let people down in Katrina. Our leaders let us down in Katrina. Another big piece of change, obviously, is immigration. And this is going to become a majority nation in just a few years. One thing people overlook is the huge migration in this country. Now, do you realize that people change addresses? About 20-25% of the public changes addresses every year. And about 2 in 10 of us plan to change addresses in the next 5 years. We have this incredible amount of moving around inside the country. And what we actually get into the book, we think there's a lot of tribalization going on, people sorting themselves out into like-minded groups. We can get into that later. Lastly, the big change is this big gap between the haves and the have-nots that is getting wider. And if you want, we can talk later about why I'm afraid it's going to get much wider. So, if you're presuming to lead people, whether you're a political leader, like President Bush or President Clinton, or a business leader like Howard Schultz of Starbucks, or Lloyd Bill of Applebee's, or a religious leader like Rick Warren, who runs a megachurch and preaches to 20,000 people every weekend. If you presume to be a leader, you have to first figure out how the people you presume to lead are changing. Well, they're changing where they live. We talked a little bit about this a minute ago. You have an incredible amount of urban sprawl going on. People, West Little Rock wasn't there when I left Little Rock. Where I ate yesterday at the Applebee's was not there in '93. You have this basically a circle of migration where you have people moving, largely minorities moving from cities to the inner ring suburbs. And you have people, mainly whites, moving from the inner ring suburbs out to these new urban areas. And you have people, largely young adults and empty nesters, moving back into the cities and gentrifying. It's almost like this circle of migration going on in the country. So they're changing where they live. They're also changing how they live. One interesting thing is, starting in the mid-1990s, the American public began what they call a recentering, a great recentering, a change in priorities. A lot of people think that, or not a lot of people think, but the data shows that the American public started believing that their careers weren't as important as having flexible hours that would help them be with their family. This is to show that people start spending more time with their families, more time volunteering, wanted to use their money and their status in life to do good. We saw a spike in that in 9/11, but actually it started before 9/11. So people were changing where they live and how they live. You had this more spiritual nature in the public. Thirdly, they're changing the way they communicate. And we have the internet that is dramatically changing the way we talk to each other. Text messaging, cell phones, all this niche media is out there. You know, the Bush campaign, what they did, and one of the many things they did in 2004 was to advertise on the local feeds at gyms in Ohio, because they realized that people they're trying to target went to gyms. So let's hit them where they live. We have going on now with the we'll get into this a little bit later, but we have a new era, a new form of opinion leaders in this country. As word of mouth communications becomes more important, as peer-to-peer communication becomes more important in society, we have these folks that we call in the book navigators. Some people call them influentials, some call them opinion writers. But basically, for some reasons we'll get into later, about 1 out of every 10 of us influence the others. Basically, help tell the other 9 what to buy, where to shop, and how to vote. People are changing how they connect with one another, how they create communities. We have a new definition of community. It's no longer necessarily the block you live on. It might be the blog you have. It might be the website you go to. It might be the social networking site you like. It might be the email chain you have. It may be the group of people who you get together once a week to go to a restaurant because you're foodies and you found each other on the internet. The whole idea of the way we connect each other is changing. So all these are things that a smart leader like President Clinton or President Bush, a smart business leader like Lloyd Hill or Howard Schultz, and a smart religious leader like Rick Warren understand and try to get to the bottom of. And what we realize with the book is kind of a shorthand for this is there's basically a handful of myths where conventional wisdom is way outpaced. We're trying to show people that hey, there's a new way of looking at things. We went outside of D.C. and outside of the box to try to look at politics in a different way through the eyes of real people and through the methods of successful business and political leaders. And we found a couple of things that are wrong with the way most folks in Washington and the mainstream media think of life today. One is, myth number 1, a company's product, a candidate's policies, or a pastor's sermons are the main appeal for most people. Now, it seems like that would be true. I mean, of course people vote on policies primarily. Right? Of course people, before they go to Applebee's, before they go to a restaurant, they're going to go to a restaurant that has the best food. Or before they go to a church, they're going to make sure they get the best food. Actually, it's not. People don't vote. People don't make choices with their head as much as they do with their heart or with their gut. I mean, if it was true that people made decisions on policies first and values second, John Kerry would have been president. Because he led George Bush in just about every poll on education, Social Security, crime, and just about every issue you can think of, he led George Bush. And people went through a checklist and decided on their president based on who scored best. John Kerry would be president. Actually, that's wrong. He wouldn't have been president. Al Gore would have been elected in 2000. Because again, he beat Bush on just about every poll issue. But the reality is that people are looking for what we call a gut value. And a smart leader makes a gut value connection. The leaders that we look at in this book all have the ability to touch people at a gut level by projecting values that are missing in leaders today and are missing in everyday life. Unfortunately, in most people's everyday lives. Values like empathy, optimism, strength and decisiveness, authenticity, faith, and a sense of community, a sense of purpose, a cause greater than yourselves. I'll speak those one at a time. Empathy. How is that a value? Who does that, what politician in recent years had the value of empathy? President Clinton. Now, we look at his policies like the middle class tax cut. He wasn't running. People didn't vote for him because he promised to cut their taxes. Matter of fact, it was pretty well known before he got elected that he probably wasn't going to be able to pull that off. And he certainly didn't pull it off when he became president. What he did was use that policy and all the policies of putting people first. You can see it here in the lobby. Nobody pulled out putting people first and said, I agree, I'm going to vote for him. No, those policies reflected the value of empathy. That times are tough in 1992. I know what you're going through, and you know what? No matter what happens, I'm going to work my butt off to the last dog eyes and take care of you. That was the gut value that people were looking for in the early 1990s, and that's the gut value that President Bush gave them. And as long as he was true to that value, he survived, even during Monica Lewinsky. And when that was going on, what did he do? He got up there every day and he said, despite what's going on, no matter what's going on, I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to do my job as president. When he got away from that, actually, I think early in his administration, when he first became president, and all of a sudden he was having, there's stories about him having his hair done by a big stylist, and was hanging around with Hollywood stars and Barbra Streisand, and it looked like he wasn't as interested in us as he was in the idea of being president and having fun with it. That's when he suffered the most politically. It was early in his administration. Strength and decisiveness. The funny thing about these gut values is they kind of change every year as we go, as the country changes, the value of the public are looking for most changes. Shortly after Watergate, it was integrity. That's what Jimmy Carter, the gut value of Jimmy Carter. All of Jimmy Carter's values were designed, policies were designed to reflect that value. During the Cold War, and certainly in 2004, there was strength and decisiveness. President Bush knew, his own polls showed, that the majority of people in 2004 disagreed with his position on Iraq. So he used that disagreement. He used that majority opposition to his primary policy as an asset. And he stood up at his convention and said, even those of you who don't agree with me, at least you know where I stand. And what he was saying was, I know what you really want out there as a leader. It may not be somebody you always agree with, but someone who you know will lead and will do what he thinks is right. And what he did was put the meter on him and say, John Kerry is not that. He's a flip-flop. He's not strong. He's not decisive. Now, it's an old story now what happened in 2005 when he wasn't true to his gut value. When he's hanging around with Lance Armstrong in the summer of 2005 and mountain biking when the desert toll is going in Iraq. And when he won't see the peace line, which is basically seen as a snub to a lot of Americans. Well, if you won't listen to her, maybe you don't understand my views. And then when Katrina hit, and then it was clear to a lot of Americans that maybe he's not as strong and as decisive as I thought. He's standing up there saying, way to go, Bernie, and obviously, or heck of a job, Bernie, and obviously there wasn't a heck of a job done. So what leaders don't understand, what their strategists don't understand, especially in politics, is that values are what Americans want to see in a candidate, in a corporation, or even a church, before they're even willing to consider the policies or the products. And again, people make decisions based on what's in their heart or gut, not necessarily when they're head. And who did his best was President Clinton. When that sign went up there in the campaign headquarters, the old Gazette building, it's the economy student, right? He told Paul McConnell, you know what? It's really the values student. It's really the values of that. It's what my economic plan is telling people about me that's important. I'm telling them what I care about. The second myth, and it's kind of related, is that Americans slavishly vote their self-interest. And I got a little debate that this is one of the faculty over lunch. The reality is that their idea of self-interest is more selfless than most politicians realize. Voters will turn to a candidate, will support a candidate who reflects their gut values over one who sides with them on policies. And we saw that in 2004, the presidential election. We saw it a year later in Virginia. Here's a guy in a state that President Bush won easily. A Democratic candidate named Tim Kaine is running for governor. And he is opposed to the death penalty. Opposed to the death penalty in Virginia. You can't win, right? He makes it an equity. He says, I'm Catholic. It's part of my faith to be opposed to the death penalty. I'm not going to make an excuse for my religion. I'm not going to apologize for my religion. Boy, did that might resonate with the folks in Virginia. I'll still carry out the death penalty because I'm the governor of the state and I need to carry out the law and I'm a law-abiding man. That's one of my values. But don't mistake the fact that my faith is very important to me. majority of the people who opposed him on it, instead of trying to flip-flop or find the perfect way, the nuanced answer that a pollster or a strategist would come up with, he just said, hey, I disagree with you, and I disagree with you on principle. And he ended up carrying the state and won a lot of voters that Bush had won very easily just a year before. Another myth. September 11th changed Americans. It's true, it's not untrue, but what people don't realize is what it really did was hasten changes that were already underway. That as I mentioned earlier, Americans were already really changing the way they looked at themselves and looked at their lives. That entering the 21st century, Americans were tired of chasing money and careers. They were determined to prioritize their lives. But if you look at the data, and there's a lot of data out there by folks like the Roper Group that really digs down into people's attitudes. It shows that people, by significant percentages, before 9/11, were spending more time with their family, were taking longer vacations, were seeking jobs with more flexible hours, even if it meant less fasting. They were spending more time praying and more time volunteering. Now, all those numbers were on the rise before 9/11, and obviously when 9/11 hit, it accelerated that trend. People were even the meaning of money changed by a significant percentage. People were saying money was meant less to bring them pleasure than it was to pass on to their children or to give to somebody in the community. What Roper concluded in the Roper reports was that the way they put it to their clients was whatever became whatever matters. Getting by became getting a life. And the me generation became the era of us. Next myth. Technology has created a more disconnected nation. This one really gets me. I spent a little bit of time up in Harvard with Bob Hutton, who wrote Rolling Alone. And it's a seminal book on how we had a steep decline in community and civic responsibility, what he calls social capital, starting in the 50s. And it's a well-documented book, and everything in it is accurate. He wrote it, though, before the internet boom really took off. And now he acknowledges that the internet is actually helping reconnect people. That the Americans are using new technologies, including the internet, to build new forms of community and civic engagement. Matter of fact, I was at an event in Washington this year where he gave an award for civic engagement for creating new social capital to Scott Heikerman, who's a co-founder of Meetup.com. If you don't know it, Meetup.com has got about 2 million members. There are folks where you can type in an interest, whether it's knitting or cooking, or you think you're a pagan or a witch, or in 2004 you could type in Howard Dean, and you could form meetups with people who have a similar interest. Putnam saw that groups like Meetup are reconnecting people. And we have this whole redefinition now in community. It's no longer the block you're living on necessarily, or the folks you hang out in your neighborhood. It can now be the block that you're on, or it can be the social networking site you're on, Friendster or Facebook. I know in my own life, I used to call my mom once a week on Sunday, and we all have for a generation. Now I have an email sitting here from her that I would answer as soon as we get done here. We email each other every day. So the internet can be a powerful tool to connect us to each other. It can be an extremely powerful tool for a political leader to give people a campaign or a cause to be a part of. It's John McCain's most powerful message. I want you to be a cause bigger than yourself. It was maybe President Bush's biggest statement. After 9/11, he had an opportunity to look us in the eyes as the president of our country and say, I want all of you to go out on Main Street and dance naked, legit, and we would have done it. Or he could have said, I want all of you to pay 50 cents more a gallon for gasoline, and we're going to overhaul the infrastructure in this country. Or we're going to impose a tax so that we can fight and get it some of the line. Or we're going to have a massive call to service unlike anything since John F. Kennedy. Any of those things he could have done. And John McCain says in our book, unfortunately, all the president did was ask us to get on planes and shopping. So whether you're a company like Applebee's or Starbucks that gives people a sense of belonging when you come into the restaurant. I mean, Applebee's is a company with 1,800 stores. Yet they build themselves and actually sell themselves as a local diner. And there are people who go in there, and this is like their cheers. And you walk in, hey, how you doing? It's what made Starbucks so powerful. they're the third place. You have your work, you have your home, and for some people, you have your Starbucks. Mega churches are the most incredible model of this. Bob Hutton actually thinks that mega churches are replacing labor unions in this country as the greatest organizational model. A mega church isn't 2,000 people on Sunday. It's 2,000 congregations of 10. It's the euchre players for God who get together on Wednesday at 10. It's the state motorcyclists for God who get together on Wednesday night. It's the diggers for God who get together on Tuesday. It's the parents who have teens who are spoiled brats who get together on Monday. It's the facility itself. I defy you to go to a mega church one Sunday, one of these big churches. Robert Lewis has one out here in Little Rock. He was quoted in the book. And go in there and not feel like this is like the modern community center. I can sit down, I can have a nice lunch here in this cafeteria and talk to some folks. I can get a cup of coffee at the Starbucks at my entrance. One kid can go to the nursery school, the other kid can go to the golf lessons, and the third kid can go with Daddy at play. You know, they have a lot of these churches have social services, mental health, health care, dental care, right there in the facilities. They've tried to make themselves the new public square, the new community center, and especially in places where they're successful out in the extras. We are dying to reconnect. When you think about a place like out in West Little Rock where I was yesterday, everyone out in that neighborhood is new to that neighborhood. They're all strangers because they weren't there 10 years ago. They're all from somewhere else. They're all looking to form those connections that maybe they had when they were growing up in the old neighborhood. And if there's a church that they can go to, that'll give them a sense of that. If there's a restaurant chain that they go to, to give them a sense of that. If there's a political campaign, or a political candidate who will help rally them together around the cause, they're going to flock. Next minute, the glut of information that's out there has made people more independent and less reliant on each other. That's something I believed before I got involved in this project. Hey, if I go on the internet and type on the button and find out anything I want about crocodiles, what do I need other people for? But the fact is that the information age, this glut of information, the fragmentation of the media, along with the decline in faith in public institutions, has caused people to turn more and more to their peers for advice. And we call these peers the best among us of influencing the rest of us. We call them navigators in this book. That when you think about it, we have this flood of information. We're confused by everything we get. You can't drive on the street without having messages blinked at you on the radio. And me, I get them on my cell phone now, and I can text message ads, and I can text message, and my latest rotisserie football update is on there, and you go on the internet, you have all this information. It's hard to sort through. At the same time, there's less people for me to turn to help sort through it in the institutions. I don't trust political endorsements. Most of us don't trust them like we did. They don't have the effect they did 20 years ago. We don't trust business leaders like we did 20 years ago. We don't even trust religious leaders like we did 20 years ago. So you have all this information out there. You're looking for help sorting through it. You're turning to each other. Now, we all help in this word-of-mouth marketplace. This number is going up, but right now it's between 14 and 29% of all conversations involve the dissemination or the propagation or the promotion of some product. Whether it's me saying to you, hey, I just read this great book about marketing, I think you need to read it. Or hey, there's this movie, I just saw this great movie, you need to see it. Or you don't want to go for so-and-so, I heard he's a real jerk. That's happening in about a third of our conversations. That number's going up. So we're all doing it. But for a lot of reasons, some of us are better at it than others, or do it more often. Either we have a large social network, or just people seem to tend to trust you. There's about 1 out of every 10 Americans who are called, some people call them influentials. That's what the Roper folks call them in a book by that name, which I highly recommend. We call them navigators because they help navigate the confusing times. There's about 1 in 10 of us who are very influential in the word-of-mouth marketplace. And what we're trying to do with this venture that Skip talked about at houseof.com is kind of catch ourselves right at the intersection of community. We're building an online community of navigators. If we can get ourselves, if we can get a collection of the people who are more powerful than any politician or business leader you can think of, collectively, we think we'd have something very powerful in the marketplace. What President Bush did was he took the book Influential, actually it was Matthew Dow, Michael Walker, gave the book out to Ken Millman and Carl Rowe in 2001 and said, you need to read this. And they realized that they needed to really delve down in the communities and find these people. And it's kind of what It's not kind of. It is what got them down the road of micro-targeting. The idea of using business data, overlaying that on consumer data, your consumer history, and overlaying that on top of your political history to figure out how you might vote and what messages you might go for. It's a big thing in politics in 2004. It got started with this idea of finding navigators, and with that book, Influentials. So what Dowd did was he took the 13, I think it was 12 or 13 questions in Influentials that the Roper people with 30 years of data decided that you can ask anybody, and depending on how you weight it, you can determine whether somebody within a 90% certainty is an influential or an navigator. Dowd took the 7 million people who would volunteer in the Bush campaign and asked them those questions, and determined that 2 million of them were navigators. And they focused all their targeting on those folks, because they realized if we can influence those people, and if we can have them talking to like-minded people in their communities, not necessarily on their blocks, but people in their churches, people in their Boy Scout troops, people in the same schools, people in the same online social networking. If we can influence these leaders in those communities, we're going to win. We're going to win the turnout vote, the turnout game. What the Republicans are doing now is Dowd, after the election, did a regressive analysis on those questions and realized there's only 4 of them that really matter. That you can still determine it with a high degree of certainty who the navigators are by asking only 4 questions. Now, every door that the Republicans knock on since 2001 since the end of the 2004 campaign in 2008, every door that knock on, they're asking those 4 questions. They're building an enormous database of the most influential people in America. Chances are 10% of the crowd here are those influentials. What we're going to do at Hot Soup is ask those 4 questions. Everybody that registers, and hopefully all of you will, in October, so we'll have a good idea of what percentage of the people who come to our site are these influentials. So these are all things that leaders need to be aware of. If you can build communities, if you can give people a cause to be a part of it, if you can find the most influential among us and really compete in a world-wide marketplace, you're going to succeed. Another myth, Republicans have a lot of ethnic survey. That one came out of the 2004 elections when President Bush won 96 out of 100 counties. The word on the street and in the press was Republicans will always win in exurbs. The reality is that Democrats can win in exurbia because voters there vote, make decisions, like I said, on lifestyle choices, not on partisanship, not on political persuasions. That you have people out there who are separating themselves, they're actually moving out there because they want to be around people like themselves. Or making lifestyle choices first. I want to live out here because it'll be safer, because the schools are better, because the taxes are lower, whatever the decisions are. They make those lifestyle decisions first. The last decisions they make, after that, is how they're going to vote. And what happens in places like that is people are all collectively in kind of an homogenous unit. They're likely to switch from party to party very easily. And again, that's what happened in Virginia, where President Bush won 7 of the fastest growing counties in Virginia by 13 percentage points. King ended up competing to a dead heat with his Republican opponent in Exeter, Virginia. Matter of fact, he won 4 of those counties outright just a year after Bush had won. And again, why? Is because he talked about his faith and his policies in a way that reflected values that people were looking for in the campaign. Myth, the electorate is divided into red state and blue state voters. The reality is that Americans are highly mobile and self-polarizing, so it makes more sense to categorize them by their lifestyle choices rather than arbitrary geographic boundaries. We call them red tribes, blue tribes, and tipping tribes. The idea that there is this great polarization of America and that there's no swing voters left is bogus. And actually the reason I can tell you that is because the guy who helped propagate that, Matthew Dowd, is a co-author of this book. He's the one who found out after the 2001 campaign that the percentage of ticket splitters had gone down from 16% in, I think, 88 or 84 to 7% in 2000 and 6% in 2004. And it was that decline that led the Bush campaign to say, we need to go to our base. We need to find new Republican voters because, my God, there's not enough swing voters out there. And it's become the conventional wisdom in Washington. But if you really look closely at the exit poll results and even some of the regular polls that are out there, as we did write this book, you'll find out that, for example, in 2004, about 35% of the electorate in 2004 were small government, fewer services, conservative Republicans. Makes sense. About 30% were big government, more service liberals, or moderate Democrats. Makes sense. 35% were big government Republicans, small government Democrats, and big and small government independents. In other words, more than a third of the voting population in 2004 had picked one of the tribes, a red tribe or a blue tribe, but actually weren't comfortable in their party. Right now, aren't really happy with the party. Now, the reason they're picking one side is they want to be part of the tribe. They want to be part of the community, a political community. They feel they need to pick Republican or Democrat, and they can sort of go where they're more comfortable. But they're really not comfortable. There is this huge disenchanted middle in American politics that neither party is appealing to. And that could really cause, I think, a revolutionary change in the political system in 2008 if a leader or a party doesn't start speaking to these people. That if the party in the political system is not more accountable to what the voters want and don't pay attention to the voters' needs. I mean, look at the percentages of people who 30 years ago were liberal, who identified themselves as liberals. It was about 20%. It was 21% in 2004. The percentage of people who 30 years ago called themselves conservative, about 34%. The number is about the same now. The percentage of people who call themselves moderate hadn't changed very much, about 45%. Next minute. The vast majority of megachurch worshipers are anti-gay, anti-abortion, conservative Republicans. The reality is, at first, that megachurches really aren't very political, because leaders like Rick Warren realize that they don't want to turn off half their potential consumer base. These guys are marketers, they're businessmen, number one. They're overseeing a $7.2 billion industry. They're not going to turn away potential customers over a political issue. Second, a surprisingly large percentage of megachurch worshipers are actually inclined to be Democrats and independents. Again, we look at the exit poll numbers at people who are likely to go to megachurches, folks who are living in suburbs, who are non-Catholic Christians and who are frequent churchgoers. 16% of them are black. 7% of them are Hispanic. And if you look at the percentage of people who go to megachurches, it's actually relatively diverse. 29% of these people call themselves Democrats, and 20% call themselves independents. That means almost half of the people who go to megachurches, or who are likely to go to megachurches, are actually up for grabs, actually Democrats and independents. 53% have no children. 20% call themselves liberal. 2/3 earn less than $75,000 a year. 2/3 don't own guns. 39% support gay rights. So why is it the Democrats can't win on their support? Why is it they haven't won in survey? It's because they're not competing. John Kerry wrote them off. George Bush tried to figure out who they were, what values they cared about, what messages they wanted, what messages, if they heard, they would vote for me. And he figured out where they were getting those messages, whether it was on their cell phones, whether it was in a gym, whether it was text messaging. The Democrats need to compete in these areas and need to stop stereotyping and start targeting these areas. Lastly, the last myth is that the best indicator of how a person will vote is his voting history or his or her views on abortion, taxes, and other issues. That another myth on the surface doesn't make sense. Actually, the reality is that the key to predicting how a person will vote or shop or where they might worship is his or her lifestyle choices. Again, people make their choices about where they're going to live, who they're going to hang out with, who they're going to get their opinions from, how they're going to communicate, what messages they're going to listen to, and where they're going to live. They make all those choices before they decide what their political decisions might be. So the key is figuring out their lifestyles and targeting through their lifestyles. The way the Bush campaign did this really quickly, what we call life targeting, what's called micro-targeting, is that they started with the voter list. Both parties have that. Democrats have the list of people who voted, and in most states how they voted, so the Republicans. Both parties add on top of that list, traditionally they have for a couple decades now, any history they have of their voting, of their political behavior. If you join the NRA, we'll flag that on the voter list next to your name. If you gave money to the name round, we'll put that on your list too. So both parties have that. That's equal. What the Bush campaign did was they gave that data to a little company called Axicom here in Little Rock, run by one of the board members is Wes Pluck, a Democrat. They gave all that information to Axicom. Axicom gave back to them a list of just about every person on the Bush list, just about every registered voters in the top 16 states. That on top of the political information they already had would include stuff like, and it would be by name. It would say Steve Rutherford. We already have this information on him politically. On top of that, we know that he likes to go on cruisers. cruises. We know he likes college football, not pro football, because of the magazines he buys. We know that knitting is his big hobby. He drives, American cars, and all this other, and it's incredible the amount of information that companies now collect on you with every electronic transaction you make. Businesses like Axicom and Claritas have been collecting this information for a couple decades now, and have been analyzing it and selling it to companies for a couple of decades now. Even mega churches. There's a company out in California that has been selling this to mega churches, church leaders, for a dozen years. It just took until 2004 before a political campaign started using it themselves. Because the Bush campaign realized that you could have, let's say you have a 30-year-old voter in Virginia, a man, who in 2004 voted Democrat. It's the third time he's voted Democrat for president. He's always voted Democrat in down ballot elections. He's a member of a union. There's not many in Virginia. He is single in 2004, works a blue-collar job. So after 2004, he gets married. He moves out to the exit. He buys a minivan. He has a kid. Now, if all you knew was what he's done in the past politically, you would assume he's a Democrat. If you're a Republican strategist, you won't even bother touching him. You won't even deal with him. But if you realize that he's bought a minivan, he's now married, he has a child, and all this stuff now is available, plus a lot. But then you realize, as a Republican, maybe I need to approach this guy. Maybe I need to figure out what it is that makes this guy tick. Maybe I need to go in. That's what the Republicans are now doing, the Democrats are not. I can go into deeper detail then if you want, but I think I'm going to wrap it up here because I really would like to take your guys' questions. But I guess the bottom line is, this country is changing, people are changing, and leaders have to change. This doesn't mean that we're trying to give people in this book new ways to fool the public. The public gets the joke now. They know they've been misled and let down. They're very well informed now. They have a lot of information. They know when they're being spun. They're looking for authenticity. They want leaders who will tell it to them straight, will even admit when they want to mistake. They want leaders to give them a community, a sense of belonging, a cause greater than themselves. They want leaders who at least will take the time to figure out where they live, how they live, and will communicate with them in the channels that they are now getting their information, whether it's a new technology or whether it's their next door neighbor who's the person they go up to every year and ask, hey, I'm buying a laptop, which one should I get? And that's where society is heading now. That's where politics is heading now. That's where business is heading now. And that's where my own profession, journalism, is heading now. And that's why we wrote this book and how to make success of this website. So, appreciate you.
We have time for some questions, so if you'll just raise your hands and please speak into the mic. We have a couple mics running around.
Hey Ron, thanks for the presentation. What are the 4 questions?
I can't tell you that, it's proprietary. The question, but if you look at the book, those 4 questions are part of the 12 that are in there, and they're very intuitive. It's stuff like, have you attended a public meeting? Have you written a letter to the editor? It's, a lot of them are actions that you've taken that suggest you're someone who's active enough to find out new information, search out new opinions, and then spread them out over here. On the size of your social network is one too. How many people do you talk to every day or on your email list? Great question.
I'll ask you another tactical question, I guess. How do you, it may be in your book, but how do you work an apple these? You spend a lot of time in them. What do you do when you walk into one?
As a consumer or as an employer?
In what you're doing, you say you stop in one all the time. And
I would do?
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's the same thing I would do that I did for years at American Legions and bars and shopping malls. I just walk up to people. Generally, when they're eating or drinking, they seem to be more loquacious. They're already in the middle of a conversation. Their drinking even better. And I just walk up and introduce myself. Hey, I'm Ron Fournier, reporter with the Associated Press. I'd like to ask your opinion. And, the magical thing is, as much as people don't trust the press for good reason, they are so hungry to have someone listen to them and to ask their opinion. And it's what I've learned with this, why I think this thing's going to be so important. People are just desperate for somebody, of some authority to ask their opinions. Even if they didn't trust me and they would tell me right off the bat, I hate your guys. I think you're big, your profession stinks. But here, let me tell you what I think about Iraq. I would do stuff like I would take trips, long trips for a week, just talking to people. And the last one I took, rented a car in Minnesota and drove down to Arkansas. And actually, one of the women I interviewed on that trip here in Arkansas in the book. But spent a week talking to people. Must have stopped and talked, tried to talk to 300-400 people. The whole trip, the whole week, 3 people politely declined to talk to me. And I had a photographer with me. So it just shows the hunger that people want to be involved and want to get their opinion out there. There's got to be more questions. They won't until the politicians earn it. They will not put more trust in politicians until politicians earn it. As long as politicians think that they can build their policies off of polls instead of deciding what they want to do and then hiring people who can sell their position, whether it's popular or not. Until politicians, when they make a mistake, admit it and move on. Until politicians address the serious issues that are out there in a serious way instead of playing the games that both parties play too often. The public isn't going to stand for it. I really think in 2008, if we really do have a third of the public that really isn't going to be a party, plus the 8 or 9% that split their tickets anyhow, you do the math. There's a lot of room out there for a politician or even a new party that steps up to the plate and says, I'm going to give it to you straight, and I'm going to give you a cause and a community to be a part of. We can have a realignment in politics. You look at all these things I talked about today without boring you further. There's a history that's very cyclical. A lot of this stuff happened 100 years ago. 100 years ago, as we're moving from one era to the next, from the agriculture to the industrial era, people were looking for new ways to connect. The old ways, like barn raisings, weren't doing any good, so we created all these fraternal organizations. Within the span of just a few years, in the early part of the last century, the Boys Club, Girls Club, Rotary Club, Elks Lodges, NAACP, American Legion, Knights of Columbus, all these fraternal organizations were created. And we're doing that again now. 100 years ago, new technologies were coming to be. Cars, vending machines, new ways to communicate, industrial machines that were both simplifying our life, but making it more complicated. The same thing's happening now. We have all these new technologies that are simplifying our life, but are now tied to the office. The other thing that happened 100 years ago was people lost faith in their institutions. Business, trust, business, you have monopolies in business, and you have political institutions that were allowing this great divide between the haves and the have-nots. 100 years from now, the loss of faith in business is there again, and certainly a loss of faith in politics. What happened 100 years ago politically was Teddy Roosevelt was able to step into that void, and as a Republican, win the presidency twice and make a pretty decent run at the vote most party. And he took on the trust. Something that's very popular at the time. I think there's a similar type void out in politics right now for that kind of figure who will rise above either party and speak right to the people and speak frankly to people and give them, especially in these times of terror and technology, a cause of a party. Others gentlemen?
You had mentioned initially that there's a spiritual revolution going on. On the other hand, what we've seen is greater polarization. Did you mean religiosity is on the rise with less tolerance, or spirituality is on the rise with more tolerance?
The data will show you that there was a steady increase of spirituality in the 1990s, in the beginning of the century, and then it spiked after 9/11, and it's still on an upward slope. Church-going, again, the public's acceptance of an institutionalized religion has been going down steadily. It spiked after 9/11 and went down within 12 months. So you have these two lines diverging where people are more spiritual, looking for a purpose in life. Purpose-driven church, the best-selling books of the Bible. Looking for purpose in life, but not always finding it in traditional churches. So I think that's what's happening. I'm sorry.
Talk to us a little bit more about hotsuit.com, your new discussion group. You obviously have moved away from being an AP reporter. Is this a new career? Is there what are you trying to develop consensus around city clerk issues? How are you thinking about this?
The number one goal, because it would be lucrative and make us money, is to create an online community of opinion leaders. Folks who advertisers are desperate for, folks who political leaders are desperate to influence. So we want to build a social networking site. We think to build it, we think to attract these type of people who are in this room. We have to build a site that has a lot of discussion on serious issues, where people are able to come to a place, the only place may be on the internet, one of the few places in society to be able to debate serious issues in a civil manner. So we're creating, giving people the tools to share with each other their opinions and their research on the serious issues of the day, and encouraging people to debate each other and to exchange information in a way that kind of breaks the gridlock that is out there in all of culture, not just in politics. So we think the byproduct will be a better way to communicate and a more civil discussion in our effort to build this community of opinion leaders.
I thought I heard you say that the gap between the haves and the have-nots may be accelerating.
It is.
Could you speak to that?
Yeah, one thing we did to try to look ahead in the future, we realized we weren't smart enough to really do that. So we spent the last chapter focusing on Generation 9/11, which is what we call the generation where the leading edge is the young people who were in high school and college, who were coming of age when 9/11 hit. And when you look at that last chapter, there's a lot of reasons for hope. For one thing, a generation is more diverse than any generation in American history, therefore more tolerant. They're more like their parents and their grandparents as far as their willingness and eagerness to be involved in the community and to give back to the community, be involved in service. Women are going to control that generation. There are already far outstripping men in college degrees and test scores. But the one thing that really disturbs us, really one of other things, but one of the main things that really disturbs us about what would be coming down the future when you look at this generation is that if you are a 21-year-old person right now who went to college and has access to technologies and access to all the things this great country can give you, the sky's the limit for what you're going to be able to do. You have more potential than maybe any other generation. It's the best time in America to be 21 years old and get college educated and be a have. It may be the worst time ever, certainly the worst time since the beginning of the century, beginning of the last century again, to be a have-not, to be somebody coming into the society without a college education, without at least a middle class existence. And what could happen, we're afraid is going to happen, is that the haves will take off and the have-nots will be left behind. Some people believe that one of the great causes that this generation that's coming up, and it is a generation that really is committed to service and has a history of being involved, that especially the kids who are in high school and college now, that they may make it their generation's calling, like their grandparents did, make it defeating fascism, their calling. They may make it their calling to reach down to that have-not generation and bring them up. That maybe we hope, the next generation of leaders, this generation 9/11, will make it their cause to level that playing field and to pull the weaker among them up. It is, again, it's kind of what happened 100 years ago when he had the Roosevelts reaching down and helping up the lower class and transforming politics in the meantime. And I see that happening again.
Actually, two-fold question. The first one is, are you getting a cut from Applebee's?
No. I do occasionally. I have had a free meal there the day I finished the book. I called their press secretary, who hadn't read the book yet. They'd read this until it was done. And I said, I'm taking my family up to the local Applebee's and celebrate that. I just turned it into the publisher. And when I got there, the public manager would not take it. But no, there's not a joint operating agreement. But I have had one free walnut apple salad. And I love it. You know, the interesting thing about Applebee's, their own studies show, and they're in the book, that they realize that when people make a decision on whether or not to go to a restaurant based on food, they don't go to Applebee's. That the people who go to Applebee's go there because they like the feeling of community and it's a good place to bring a family. But they also find that most people go to a restaurant, not necessarily for the food.
They have sippy cups for the children. It's a big issue.
I like the kids' menus.
My second question to you is, after talking to all these people, what do they think of the media? And it kind of follows up, are people trusting the media?
No. We're one of those institutions they've lost faith in. On the right, they think that we're a bunch of liberal hacks. On the left, they think that we kowtow to President Bush. And in the middle, they think that we're ineffective at our jobs and don't write things that are relevant to them. And I think they're all right. And I think that of the best of us, the best in the business are still doing a good job. But the industry is really changing, and not necessarily for the better.
It's the last question here.
I love the notion that you're going to really try to develop really good debate and discussion on the website. One of the most difficult things that I find to do is to actually facilitate that. So what are some of your ideas of how you're going to do that?
Facilitate discussion?
Really good, productive discussion.
One thing we're going to do is we're going to have bring some people on the site that might be interesting to hear their opinions, especially when we put them in an interesting mix. For example, we're going to have this hot issues section that will pose a different question every couple of days. On immigration, for example, it might be instead of should President Bush sign the Pence bill, we'll ask, is the melting pot working? Instead of having the same two jokers who are on CNN all the time, we might have John McCain, the mayor of Dearborn, Michigan, a first-generation Hispanic nurse who's a member of SCIU, and the president of Mexico, and have them all get the conversation started. More importantly, we're going to have what we call loops, discussion centers, where anybody can ask, anybody can start a discussion board, a loop about any topic they want. And not only get the discussion going, but they can upload any type of information that goes along with it, any video, any talking points, any papers they've written, anything that they've produced. And we'll have, just like on some of these other social networking sites, we'll have the community kind of giving each other credibility ratings based on how well the conversations are. So you could have somebody walking around the community who everyone else in the community has said that's someone who has some smart opinions that we really appreciate. You could have someone else, just like on eBay. If you screw up on eBay and you cheat, before you know it, your trust score goes down and you're no longer relevant. The same thing will happen on a site like this. You have questions?
Thanks. So I hear you saying that politicians are not getting votes based on issues. People are voting their lifestyles and their values. First, if you are an activist who's passionately interested in electric cars, what do you do given the new situation?
That's a great example of a policy that could be used to express a value. What you want to do is explain to people why electric cars are relevant to their life and could help make their family, their community, their country a better place. An example that I like to use is the environment. Some politicians, when they talk about the environment, they talk about the Kyoto Treaty and the emissions and get deep into the great policy. What people really care about is the drinking water safe, or can they go to clean beaches? So that, again, I'm not talking about trimming or changing your policies. I'm talking. The idea is that you want to present these policies in ways that reflect a higher value, something that's good for my family, good for my community, something that shows authenticity, something that shows strength in the sentence, and something that shows empathy. One of those values, or integrity.
Okay, before we adjourn, you notice we have these flyers on the chair. You just go to the website, fill out this quiz.
Yeah, the whole idea that you can tell how somebody may vote based on their lifestyle choices, which is what micro-targeting and web-targeting is. We just have this fun little quiz on the website that you can answer it, and within a degree of certainty to tell you whether Republican or Democrat. It's kind of a gimmick just to get people on the website to buy a vote, but it's
Well, there's a book signing. Ron will go out there and sign books. And there's wine and cheese out in the back, so please help yourself. Let's thank Ron for coming one more time.